we say structuralism, or when we start reading about literary criticism in general, we have to start with structuralism. So this is the mother of all, or the father of all. Why? Because the word itself says it gives a proper pattern or structure to entire school of criticism. So what we do in this school of criticism, number one, we try to understand not just an individual text that you are going to analyze. We try to understand how this particular individual text, confirms or goes against, all the underlying structure of literary elements. So in order to explain that, I have to give an example. Okay, so we are starting with a fresh school of criticism. Let's go with an example, then we'll understand. So whenever you are you say that I'm going to do a structuralist analysis of a text, right? So what do you do? First, you study that particular individual text, a poem, a particular novel or drama. Then you say how this particular novel goes against the established tradition of novels or their tradition, or how it conforms to the already existing structure. So either it goes against it or it follows it, right? And ultimately you say these are the shared structures or elements by this individual text, the structuralist. So when we say the structuralist, we have to begin with Ferdinand de Saussure, Swiss linguist, professor of general linguistics. And when we say Ferdinand Saussure, 1857-1913, his years, general linguistics. So he started off his career as a comparative linguistics. What is comparative linguistics? You compare two or more languages. Okay, so some of you, I have already taught you historical linguistics. So in historical linguistics, we compare or we study a language family. When we say Dravidian language family, we study Tamil, Malayalam, Telugu, Kannadam, Tulu. There are a lot of other languages. We try to see some commonalities among them and also its individual properties. Or we also say all these languages, including Tamil, come from a prototypical, proto language, right? And that's how Saussure also started. Saussure started his career as a linguist with historical linguistics, right? Comparative linguistics, because in historical linguistics, we compare languages and we study language families and language change. So this is one of his works, Memoir on the Original System of Vowels in the Indo-European Languages. So generally, anyone starting with historical linguistics, they study this Indo-European languages, which includes English. Then there is a shift in his way of teaching. Of course, he's a professor at the University of Geneva. First, he taught Indo-European linguistics and Sanskrit, kind of a traditional way of starting. Then he shifted to general linguistics. His basic question, see, we compare languages and we study the features of a particular language or across languages, or we take particular language and its evolution. But we don't understand how a language functions. Comparative linguistics or historical linguistics doesn't tell you how languages generally function. They don't tell you. We either talk about evolution, I started in this area, or we see these are the words, common words you find in Tamil and Malayalam, or you go for German and English, or any other language. But basic question, how does a language function? So in order to understand that, we have to abandon this comparative linguistics. We have to study language in general, right? Linguistics in general, instead of focusing on historical linguistics. This shift is important. And he came up with something called semiology. What is semiology? The study of sign, S-I-G-N. What is a sign? If you say traffic sign, or you see an arrow mark, it points to something, right? Sign is something that points to something, simple. You say there's a sign, it refers to something or it points to something. So that is sign. So anything is a sign, all right? But you have Saussure restricting himself with linguistic sign, mostly language. Then other critics expanded this to different thing. So we have this famous work. So this is this paradigm shift when it comes to linguistics. Earlier, linguistics was not considered a science. So it's a kind of analysis compared to linguistics. Then comes Saussure. Saussure said, course in general linguistics. Let's study how languages function in general. Okay. So he gave a series of lectures compiled, and the lectures were compiled, written by Charles Bailey and Albert Sechet, Chehaye, students and colleagues of Saussure. And 1916, they came up with this book. 1900s or 1916, it marks a shift in linguistics in general. So we are moving from historical linguistics or comparative linguistics to general linguistics. We study language properties in general. So what are language properties? So Saussure talks about nature of the linguistic sign. So I told you before, sign could be anything, but he is more focusing on linguistic sign, language. So this is his contribution, semiology. So what is a sign? Something that stands for other than itself. See, you see an arrow mark. The arrow mark doesn't draw attention to the arrow mark itself. It is actually pointing to something else, right? That is a sign. A sign doesn't draw attention to itself, but it draws your attention to something else. So that is a sign. For instance, in language, whenever we say something, tree, whether you are looking at the screen, you have this graphemes, series of graphemes, T-R-E-E, tree, or when I say tree, you are listening to me, auditory. Whether it is auditory sign or visual sign, what comes to your mind? A kind of a vague figure of a tree, right? So I should say, this is how language functions. And this is true, not only for Tamil, not only for English, not only for other languages, languages in general, we have two layers. So we have a series of sounds, and when we pronounce this sound, we have an established convention. Okay, these sounds, series of sounds associated with a concept. And when we speak, and this series of sound invoke, a kind of a film of ideas in our mind. And this is what happens in languages in general. So this is how Saussure shifted. That's a kind of a paradigm shift, change in understanding. So earlier they just compared language families and different languages, but we couldn't come up with this kind of an idea. They simply said, okay, these in Tamil and Malayalam, we have this word called mango, manga. So yes, then Portuguese, they took this word to English. So in English, we get this word mango, which is borrowed via Portuguese from Malayalam. Then from Malayalam, we come to the origin Tamil. From Tamil, we go to a prototype Dravidian language, right? But it doesn't explain how language functions in general. Then Saussure says, this is how language function. In the sense, we say something or we look at something, right? That is called material form of a sign, right? What is a material form? When I say material form, that is sensory, something that you can feel, sensory. When I say tree, you can hear it. It's an auditory one. Or tree written there, you can see. So something that is tangible, something that you can feel or sense. So that is a signifier. Okay, the material form of a sign. That's why it's called material. The next one is psychological, signified. It is not material. So when I say tree, the idea of a tree comes to your mind. It's not the real tree, the idea of a tree. So that is called signified, the mental concept evoked by the signifier. So this is his greatest contribution to linguistics. Then there is a kind of a revolution in the field of linguistics. Then this is the shift. Then we go deeper. So the sign introduced by Saussure is a dyadic sign made of two components. One, signifier, signified. He called signifier sound image. Tree, when I say tree, a kind of a sound image. Then it evokes concept, a mental concept. And you can also see two arrow marks, one on this side, upside, and another on this side, downside. Okay. In the sense, a sound image can recall a concept. Sometimes when you think of the image tree, you can also recall the word tree, right? A concept can recall sound. So both, all right? So this is how he defines a linguistic sign. So that's why it's called a dyadic. Dyadic means made of two. Because today I'm not talking about another uh, uh, father of detective fiction, father of semiology or science. Anyone? American logician and mathematician who came up with a field called semiotics. So Saussure called it semiology. Yes.
Umberto Eco, sir.
No. Umberto Eco, Italian. Umberto Eco,
Dyadic science he introduced, sir, but name couldn't.
Yes, Peirce. We will talk about Peirce when we discuss. Yes. We will talk about Peirce when we discuss post-structuralism. Okay, because he goes beyond Saussure. But Saussure we need because Saussure is very simple. Anyone can understand and easy. So a discipline is formed. But Peirce is tough. He doesn't come up with something concrete. It goes on and on. So people hardly go for such. Peirce. Okay. Yes, Charles Sanders Peirce. Raghavi, yes, that's good. C.S. Peirce. Okay, the name is pronounced Peirce. So he came up with semiotics. So Saussure and Peirce both are fathers of there's a field, the science of science. But the thing is, he used the name semiology, and Peirce used the name semiotics. But both are same. But his sign is a triadic sign. C.S. Peirce, triadic, three-part. We'll talk about that in the later class. Here we have dyadic sign. So this is Saussure's definition. The linguistic sign unites not a thing and a name, but a concept and a sound image. So that's his sign. So a linguistic sign is a two-sided psychological entity, right? So we have this, it happens in our mind. So we think of a material sign, signifier, then we go for the mental concept, right? And the two elements are intimately united. You can't divide. And each recalls the other. That is important. And that's why we have these two arrow marks. Then we go for sound and thought. Then Saussure came up with this analogy, sound and thought. So in language, you can't divide sound from thought. So when you see language, we speak a language. A series of sounds are associated with a particular thought, a series of thought. We can't divide the thought from sound. So he gave an analogy, a comparison. So he said, take a sheet of paper, write something on it. Okay. So can you divide? One cannot cut the front without cutting the back. I mean, can you divide the sheet of paper? This is the front part of the paper and this is the back part of the paper. It's tough. A paper is made of front and back. The moment you cut, whatever way you cut the paper, you get both sides. Similar way, language, you can't divide sounds from thought. So that's his understanding of language in general. Thought is the front part of the paper, sound is the back part. Okay, so one recalls the other. So we travel between the two realms, thought and sound. So this is how language functions. So this is how Saussure goes beyond historical linguistics. In historical linguistics, we mechanically study a particular language across time, across ages, across centuries and decades. But here we take a particular period of language, then we study, we try to understand how language functions. So this is Saussure's contribution. And he comes up with certain principles. The first principle, the arbitrary nature of the sign. What is arbitrary? A-R-B-I-T-R-A-R-Y. Arbitrary, no logic. There is no logic in the sense that the bond between signifier and signified is arbitrary. So this is a very famous statement. We should know this. Why? When we say tree, it evokes the concept of the idea of tree. But we have another question. Is there a logic? Why this tree is called a tree? There is no logic. Or in Tamil, why we call this maram or Malayalam maram, or any other language, we use another word. But we don't know why tree is called maram in Tamil, or if there is a logic, all the languages should use only one word, right? If there is logic, we should all have maram, or we should all have tree, or we should have some other word in other languages. But each language is a system. That's the understanding we get. So each language has a system of its own, certain conventions. Okay, so this is a general principle. Okay, we say something, it evokes a concept. That's a general principle. But every language has its own convention. In Tamil, we are told maram is called, it represents this idea of tree. And in French, arbre, or Latin, arbre. So that is their idea, right? So simply put, there's no logic at all. It's only a convention we follow. If someone told, okay, you call chedi dampa maro. If someone says chedi, I mean a kind of a plant. Plant is a tree. If someone said that, use the word plant to represent the idea of a tree, we would have believed, right? Or if someone said the word cat and pointed out to dog, as a child, we would have believed, oh, that is actually a cat, but we are pointing to a dog. There's no logic. Why we call a dog or a cat a cat? Simply put, the linguistic sign is arbitrary. There is no logic. Likewise, any traffic signal, why red means stop, or yellow, ready, get ready, or green, go. It's a convention. So language is a system of conventions we follow. That convention is given to us. There is no, it is arbitrary convention. We follow that blindly. Okay. Then principle number 2, the linear nature of the signifier. Now we are focusing on the signifier. Signifier is basically auditory, sensory, right? Material form. And why it is linear? In the sense, the moment it's more present, I mean, it happens in the present tense. When I say elephant, it is a linear nature, linear in the time form. It represents a time span. Elephant, I am uttering now, and you can see the line. So if you want to see that span, write it down. ELEPHANT. So it is a linear. So what is linear? In a straight line. It's a single dimension, right? It's not a non-linear. You put it in a different order. So whenever it comes to the sign, especially auditory, not a visual sign. Visual sign or other moving images, we have a lot of dimensions. But when it comes to auditory sign, the span is measurable in a single dimension. It is a line. So that's why we write that word. It is a linear one. Elephant. So in order to understand, or you want that idea of an elephant, it should be linear. You have to first say ELEPHANT. If you rearrange or put it in a non-linear way, fa elephant, you won't understand. Or font fa el, you don't understand. You put it in a different order. So signifier should be of linear nature in a straight line. So this is principle number 2. Then we have this another feature of sign, the immutability of the sign. What is immutability? Something is fixed, that doesn't move. Okay, in the sense, the signifier, though to all appearances freely chosen, with all respect to the idea it represents, is actually fixed, not free. As I told you before, each linguistic community here refers to the language community, Tamil community or Hindi community, Bengali or English or Tamil Malayalam. We have a lot of communities. Each community, each language system, they have their own conventions. They are fixed. We don't change it. So no society, in fact, knows or has ever known language other than a product inherited from preceding generations. So we speak this language, your mother tongue or our mother tongue. How did we invent? No. Did we come up with some new expressions? No. We are born into a particular system of language and we follow the tradition. So that's how we learned our mother tongue, any language for that matter. And that's why it's called immutability. It is fixed, it's a given, then we follow that. So this is the immutability of the sign. There is hardly anything that we produce something new. We are born into a language, it is a fixed category, fixed convention, we follow that, right? So this is one of the natures of the sign, immutability, fixed signs. Tree is a tree, it's a fixed one. If we say, hey, I'm going to be radical, I'm going to call this cat, hereafter, you all, whenever I say cat, think of tree. No one will do that. It's a fixed one. Okay. Then, but the opposite is also true, because language evolves. The mutability of the sign. This is the opposite. Mutability in the sense change. So there is change in the sense across languages because of time. There is a change in the word, how a word is pronounced, from that to, so there's a change in sounds, there's a change in thought. So this nature is called mutability of the sign, but it happens over time, not in a given point of time, across time. More or less a rapid change of linguistic signs. For instance, take old words in any language and new words. For instance, from Anglo-Saxon, we have a word given by Saussure. See, by the way, all the words given here are exactly taken from the given text. I hardly use my words here. I'm just a mediator, right, between this theorist and you. So FOT, foot, right? So foot, even now English we same. So this is a immutability of the sign. So there is hardly any change. So in English we say FOT, foot. It refers to the part of the leg, the bottom part. It was there in the Anglo-Saxon period. So there is no change. But the plural form used by the Anglo-Saxons, FOTI, to refer to two foot or 2 feet. Now in English, we get this modern English, the spelling and the form, there's a change, FEET. But Anglo-Saxon, FOTI. So they used I, maybe 40 or 40 something. So here we go for feet. So this is change. So we changed the sign, series of sounds. So there is mutability. So this is called mutability nature of the sign. So there is immutability, fixed signs. There are also evolution. We change. Okay. So both are possible. So if there is no mutability, a language won't grow. Okay. So these are some of the understanding. Then comes this. So whenever we say Saussure, yes for synchronic. When we say Saussure, Saussure is mostly associated with synchronic linguistics. What is synchronic linguistics? Synchronic linguistics is all about studying a language and its general principles at a given point of time. Okay, so this is the aim of general synchronic linguistics, to set up the fundamental principles of any idiosyncratic synchronic system, synchronic given point of time, or the constituents of any language state. So you have to take how a language functions, right? So this is how a function. So now you get an idea. So we speak, it is a series of sounds. Whenever we listen to a series of sounds, we have a series of images in your mind. So it's kind of a thought and sound pattern, and that's how we understand language. So this is general principles. And synchronic, if you study a language in a given point of time, for instance, if you are going to study English or Tamil or any of your mother tongue during the COVID period, next in the last 2 years, 3 years next. So what happened during this time? Have you get any new words in Tamil to represent this? Because of this shift, because of this pandemic, language automatically changes, right? But we study only the given point of time. We are not studying across time. Given point of time, how we study that change and how this language change its quality, right? So earlier, for instance, in Tamil, they have this Muhamudi, mask we wear, right? Now, when we say mask, it's a different meaning. So Tamil didn't have the Tamil word for this mask we wear to cover our nose and mouth. So now, what's the word we have in Tamil for this mask, not the earlier mask? Muha Yes, earlier Muha Moodi, one that covers your face. Now we have this word Muha Kavasam, something that protects your face. So that's the literal translation of the Tamil word Muha Kavasam, something that protects, because protection is primary during COVID time. But both are mask. But during this time, we come up with something new, or social distancing, a new coinage to represent this time. Then as a language, growing language, alive language, any alive language will come up with its own coinage. So Tamil is very much alive. We can feel that because immediately it comes up with a translation. So you can also see the translation in across languages in India. Because if a language is alive, it has to come up with its own coinage to represent a particular one. If you simply follow the English one, social distancing, then there won't be any evolution. After a period of time, social distancing will be there in Tamil. Then we can't have the thought pattern, how to think in Tamil, right? Or in your mother tongue. right? In Tamil, what is the equivalent for social distancing? Anyone?
Samuha Ideveli.
Yes, almost an exact translation. Samuha idevali, social distance, exact translation. Okay, but it is in Tamil. Similar way, there should be some translation in Malayalam or Hindi or Bengali in other Indian languages. So that's how a language grows. So if you study this particular time, so that is more synchronic. But if you want to say Tamil, how Tamil evolved from Sangam 2000 years ago, and now there are a lot of changes. So if you study that, that is diachronic linguistics or historical linguistics. So historical linguistics more to do with comparison, comparative linguistics. You compare two languages or you compare two versions of the language, right? One version we have Sangam, earlier Tamil, old Tamil, now contemporary Tamil. So this is diachronic. You study a language across time. And if you study language at a particular time, this is synchronic. Saussure is more bothered about synchronic because synchronic is tough. You know, when we say compare across time or two languages, easy in the sense, definitely you'll look at some features, differences, commonalities. But studying your own language at a given period of time is very tough. You have to work a lot. Simply put, I can explain this difficulty. Can you define the word tree in English? Can you define the word maram in Tamil? How are you? You know, it's a simple word, but using your own mother tongue to define a simple word is a tough task. But if you want to explain the same word in other language, hey, that is maram or that is a tree, simple. But explaining tree in English or explaining that concept in your mother tongue is tough, synchronic. Okay, so with this, let's go to signification. So what happens? There is a process, right, in our brain. So there is a process how we connect this signifier with the signified. So earlier we saw that signifier is a sound image and the concept it evokes is signified. Okay, and what is the signification? How do we get this? When I say tree, how does it invokes that idea in your mind? Because that's how it functions. So each sign is independent and self-contained. So initially, when we learn a language, we learn words. Each word is a sign. So it is independent. So when we say a baby, or when we say toy, when we say amma, when we say a tree, a cat. So initially we learn languages by learning self-contained independent signs. So one sign not associated with other signs, we simply learn a word, tree, tree, cat, cat, that kind of an independent and self-contained within themselves. On the other hand, the sign itself is in turn the counterpart of the other signs of languages. After a period of time, what we do, we compare one sign with another sign. That's how language functions. So initially we go for signification. We take an individual sign because it is independent. You need not compare tree with anything else. It has signifier, signified, fine. So we understand one idea, one sound pattern, one thought pattern, simple. Then we compare and contrast. And that is important because that's how we get linguistic value. This word value is important. What is linguistic value? So when I say tree, or when I say plant, when I say sapling, or when I say seed, and if I ask you to put it in a hierarchy, so what comes first? Do you think, will you put seed first or tree first? Because from tree, from that seed, we get the tree. Or if I say hierarchy, which will you put first? Tree or seed? You know, in terms of hierarchy, I think most of you will go for tree because it is the evolution, the last end. Then you put it, you go below, right? Then why? Because we value, we assign some value to the tree. Because when we say tree, there are a lot of branches. It gives wood, it gives a shade, it gives a fruit, it gives everything to you, right? Oxygen, now technically. So we create hierarchy, we assign value. How do you assign value? So we compare a tree with a plant. So if I say I'm going to give you a plant, then you say, oh. So if I say I'm going to a piece of land with a lot of trees in it, then you, oh, very good. So that is property, and this is a plant. right? When I give you property, you are happy because we assign value to that. So how do you get this value? We compare. We compare one sign with another sign. Now it is not an individual one. So we get value because we compare. Simply put, if I ask you, maybe if it's a class, if I give you 10 rupee note, then if I ask you to give back 100 rupee note, will you give me? Definitely won't. So you are cheating. Why? I say, see, 10 rupees a note, 100 rupees a note. Both are notes, right? So why don't you give my, no, I'm giving you 10 rupee note. Why don't you give me 100 rupee note? No, you say, no, it has more value. Then how do you get that value? Because we compare. So this is what happens. So after a period of time, not signification, we move from signification, when you say signification, independent, self-contained sign. When we say value, you compare one sign with another sign. So that's how language functions. So that's how Saussure wrote this sentence. Language is a system of interdependent terms. Yes, it has its own individuality. Tree is something, plant is something, sapling is something, seed is something. But in which the value of each term, plant, tree, everything, results solely from the simultaneous presence of the others. So without the presence of the others, we can't get linguistic value, right? So that's how this language functions. So after listening to Saussure and his understanding, now we have a broad understanding of language in general, not Tamil or English, language in general. So this is called general linguistics. Okay, and this is how he changed everything. So put it in sum, the sign considered in its totality. Signs are purely differential. So how do you get meaning? You have to differentiate. So you have to differentiate one sign from another sign. So that is one of the features. Okay, and within sign, arbitrary. There is no bond between signifier and signified. There is no logic why a tree is called tree. But in order to understand the value of tree, you can compare it with plant. So signs are purely differential and defined not by their positive content. So signification is positive, it happens within, but negatively by their values. So you have to negate. What is a cat? Cat is not a dog. So that's how you understand the value of cat or a dog. We put dog first because of its nature and its ferociousness, right? So we get value not through positive content like signification, but negative. So we have to negate one term with the another term. So that's how we get value. Okay, so this is a very famous statement. Whenever we say Saussure, this is a statement we understand. In language, there are only differences without positive terms. The entire class so far is to understand this simple statement, right? But it's tough. Okay, now I hope you have some idea about this statement. In language, there are only differences, right? So we get value through difference without positive terms. There is no positive. Individual sign is positive, but other signs you have to compare with differences. Through language works through differences. This is important because this idea will be challenged by later critics like Derrida, right? So let's go on. So simply put, language is a system of semiotic differences. So this is the definition we can arrive at. So I told you before, what is the idea of synchronic linguistics? You have general idea of language. So this is the idea. Language is a system of semiotic differences. You differentiate one sign from another sign. So that is semiotic differences. And Saussure also used some technical terms. So he came up with this word called langue, L-A-N-G-U-E, from Latin and French, which means tongue, naak. And from this word, we get the word language. So we use tongue to speak, right? So we get this word lang. So when we say lang, a system of signs. So it's like, remember your brain or a kind of a godown or a bureau, right? So in which we collect everything like this detective, a kind of an attic, like Sherlock Holmes, we put everything there. So whenever we learn a language, we learn everything and store it there. So it's a system of signs. A sign user learns it with effort, right? We put everything. It's our storehouse of or a knowledge of our mother tongue or any language for that matter. Okay, but here morely languages in general. Saussure talks about languages general. Then parole. Parole refers to speech, how you speak. So signs in use. So in your brain, you have a lot of ideas, but at a particular instance, you use only certain signs, and that is called parole. One of the manifestations of lang. And the way you speak to a girl, the way you speak to a mom or dad differs. So it depends on the people. We also change the signs. So that is parole. So lang is a system of signs. Parole, particular instance, signs in use. And the same idea is expressed by another critic. So we are deviating from the class here. So we have Noam Chomsky, later critic, 1900s, 1957. He came up with a paradigm shift with the publication of Syntactic Structures. In that, he made this statement: colorless green ideas sleep furiously. So syntactically good. So it's a series of ideas, but no logic. Colorless, one sign; green, another sign; ideas, another sign; sleep furiously, another sign. Syntactically correct, but in terms of semantic, it's a failure. So what happens? We make reasonable sounds, reasonable sentences. Syntactic constructions to convey some ideas. So here, green cannot be colorless. Ideas can be colorless and green. No. Can ideas sleep? No. Even if it sleeps, can it sleep furiously? No. So syntactically correct, but semantically wrong. So he said, we don't make this kind of a sentence in a language. I don't think so. In English, we don't go for. Why? Because we know it is not allowed. This sentence is not allowed in that particular language, right? So Chomsky talks about mother tongue. Focus is more on mother tongue. Saussure talks about language in general. Both talk about something common. So Chomsky says competence, your power, or speaker's knowledge of that mother tongue. That is competence. So without this competence, your power, you can't speak. With competence, you can perform, right? So for instance, it's like learning to operate a computer or playing a game. So you need certain skill. So that skill set is called competence. And performance, how you perform in a particular match or a particular game, right? So the specific utterances of a speech to an individual. So that is performance. So both are same, one and the same. So both are considered the fathers of modern linguistics, right? Chomsky's idea of competence is one and the same with the Saussure's lang, and Chomsky's performance is one and the same, Saussure's parole. Okay, or simply put, Saussure gave an example of the game of chess. So when I say chess, no, I don't think all of you can play chess. All of us can play chess. So if you want to play chess, what you do? You have to develop a lang, competence. So you go and first you look at the bird, the black and white combination. Then you try to understand how an individual chess piece moves across the boxes. There are certain rules. Then you watch certain games and you study about this, and you learn whatever you get about that game you get. That is lang. But if I ask you to play with me, then that is your performance, right? Whatever you learn, you put it to use with a particular match, that particular instance. That is parole. So this is the definition given by Saussure. So Saussure gave this idea of chess. So language is like playing a game. Language is like a game. You learn the rules. It is there in your mind. Competence. That is your skill set. Then you put it to use. That is parole. And one more thing. You don't memorize everything, all your moves. You don't memorize all the sentences in a language. It just comes after knowing that rules. It comes automatically. Particular sentence, it just comes to me. I don't think I memorized whatever I speak now. I just speak. That's all. Depends on the situation. Language, right? We develop that skill. We don't memorize all the sentences we are going to speak. It comes naturally to us. Similar with chess, depends on the opponent's move. You also make a move. You don't memorize, I'm going to make all these moves today. No, you can't do that, because depends on the context. If the person goes for different opening in the chest, you have to go for different opening. So you use your competence in that context. That is parole.